Well, another Steam Next Fest has come and gone, and I once again played a load of great game demos. As it's Halloween, for this one I purposely went out of my way to find and play a load of indie horror games, and I've picked out 5 that stood out to me to show you in this video. Also, is anyone else just loving the fact that horror games are back in such a big way? It's like, no matter where you look now, indie, AAA, whatever, there's always something coming out that's worth playing. It's great. If you do like the look of any of the games in this video, don't forget to go and wishlist them, as it really helps the devs out. And even though Next Fest is over, all of the games featured still have their demos up for you to try, so go and do that too if you fancy giving any of them a go. Alright, cool, let's get into it.
You ever hear about the Appalachian Ant Farm?
The what?
Up first we have this game, which is well, it's probably best to let the devs tell you a bit about it first, I guess.
10 Dead Doves is a single-player, narrative horror game, inspired by the likes of Resident Evil, Silent Hill, but also with a bit of modern sensibility. Also, I have no idea how to make a game. Near the beginning of development, we decided to be very smart and plan around our strengths and weaknesses in regards to, being morons.
I think it's a good idea for us to make a video game or something. Okay.
That full devlog is great, by the way. I highly recommend watching it, and I'll stick a link to it in the description if you want to check it out. 10 Dead Doves is a single player fixed perspective narrative horror game that follows 2 friends, Marcus and Sean, as they search for the urban legend known only as the Ant Farm. This will take them into the dark heart of Appalachia, where all sorts of weird shit is going down. One of the first things that stood out to me about this game is the insane way it looks. Like, just look at this character model for a second. It's as if it's been painfully extracted from a PS1 game and then forcibly inserted into this one against its will. That's the best way I can describe these visuals. Somehow though, against all odds, when placed in the environment with everything else, it does work well, and even though it's a pretty weird looking game on the whole, the game's got an original style, so I gotta give the devs props for that at the very least. The 2 main characters are also being voiced by the developers, and as they are friends in real life, it lends a really natural feel into the back and forth of the conversations. You can tell these guys are having a laugh putting this thing together while also trying to make something actually decent, which is pretty cool, isn't it?
John, what is the first rule of hiking?
Kill everyone you meet?
Stay put. Not the first rule of hiking, I mean when you're lost.
I don't see how that's relevant.
This is how people die, you know! Are you a dyer?
The gameplay is all about exploring areas, finding objects to interact with, along with solving the occasional puzzle. Each environment is littered with stuff, so you'll need to rummage through it all to find keys and other items of interest in order to progress. It also helps that the characters are pretty chatty and always seem to have something witty to say about the things you're looking at. Towards the end of the demo, there was this sequence that had the 2 lads running for their lives. As far as combat goes, I don't think the game will have any enemies to fight, at least it didn't appear like it would from what I played. It's very narrative heavy, and this side of things was doing a good job of selling the weirdness of it all while keeping things interesting.
They writhe and parade as a flooded rat does past the walls of my inkly lit crypt.
So I enjoyed my time with 10 Dead Doves. It seems to be a pretty unconventional game that's doing some cool things, and I'm looking forward to seeing where it all goes. Fortunately, the game is coming out in December, so there isn't long to wait.
They're watching me.
Stop it!
I know, no.
Next, we have Becrowned, which is a survival horror game that has a very cool old school aesthetic. I'm a big fan of how indies are now leaning into this kind of graphical style. I find it to be a perfect fit for horror games in particular, and I love how the lower poly count kind of forces your brain to fill in the gaps. It just makes it all that much scarier to me. Anyway, in this game you play as Richard Torrance, a man who finds himself stuck in a pretty horrific situation. For some reason, he's in a twisted nightmare realm where he's tormented by his past and hunted by strange creatures. At the start of the demo, and what I'm presuming is the game's opening cutscene, you see him descending into this place while ominous quotes referencing memory, family and duty flash up on the screen. To me, this suggests that Richard might be in a hell of his own creation or something similar to that, which is pretty Silent Hill innit. There's also this warning that pops up, and yeah, the game just seems to be wearing this particular inspiration on its sleeve. The similarities don't stop there either. Menus in the UI are very reminiscent of survival horror classics, with the map looking like it was pulled right out of one of them. And you can absolutely bet that I was whipping that thing out every 5 seconds to make sure I'd added every door and point of interest to it as I came across them. Gameplay in Becrowned is also pretty in line with what you'd expect from this type of game. Combat encounters seem intentionally awkward, with melee attacks being risky and ammo being low. One thing I noticed was that enemies are unable to follow you in and out of different rooms, so if you can get past them without wasting any health and ammo, it's probably best to do so, because that stuff seemed pretty limited. Puzzles also play a major role, and were pretty varied even at this early stage. At one point I had to help this poor soul get a cig, which required a bit of searching around and using items in specific places. Then another had me reading notes to figure out how to correctly order some books, which then gave me a code for a safe. You even have a radio that you can use in certain areas to hear spooky voices and reveal parts of the story. Each puzzle was well thought out and had just the right amount of difficulty. That book one took me a good 5 minutes before it clicked, and it was satisfying once I got it. Overall, I enjoyed the demo for Becrowned. I think the game has a lot of potential, and as far as I'm aware, it's a fairly small team working on it, so they're obviously putting in a lot of effort into making something both familiar and new. I like the setup, and I'm intrigued to find out just what it is that Richard has done to land himself in this situation. There's currently no release date for it, but hopefully it's not too far away. This is COVEN, which is a hyper-violent retro FPS where you use a variety of spells and weapons to brutalise your enemies, then eat their remains for health. Yeah, it's as awesome as it sounds, this one. So in this game, you play as an unnamed girl in the 1600s who is wrongly accused of witchcraft, then burned at the stake. So she's not having the best day. This isn't the end for her though, as sometime after being burnt alive, she's mysteriously resurrected by an unknown force. She then literally claws her way out of the grave and sets off on a path of revenge against those who wronged her. And what sweet revenge it is. One of the first things that stood out to me about COVEN is just how violent it is. There are many ways to punish your enemies, including, but not limited to, axing them in half, shotgunning them to bits, taking their heads off with a well-aimed pistol shot, casting a variety of spells on them, including one that hangs them, which is just fucking awesome, chowing down on their bodies for health, then vomiting them back up once the acid meter is built up from all that eating. So as you can see, playing this game is quite literally a bloody good time. The combat is fast and fun, and there's a decent variety of enemies to fight, but it's also worth noting that you're a bit of a glass cannon. You can quickly take enemies out, but you also take a lot of damage when you hit. Enemies also come in pretty large numbers and can attack from all directions, so things can easily get out of hand if you're not careful. Luckily, you're pretty mobile. You're able to jump, dash, slide, and even slow down time, which is an ability that's on a cooldown. You'll need to utilise everything at your disposal if you want to survive. Ammo and mana are also pretty limited, so you do need to keep an eye out for these as you fight and make an effort to collect them as you explore. And speaking of exploration, like any good retro-inspired shooter, each level is packed with optional areas and hidden secrets to find. Because you can quickly burn through resources, it's a good idea to find at least a couple of these per level, as they contain additional items that will help you to survive that much longer. Each map is also fairly large and complex, with many different keys to find that will open the corresponding doors, which then gives you access to the next area. There are also notes scattered about the place, which gives additional context to what is happening, and the girl will also comment on things she recognises. The notes are pretty humorous too, and I enjoyed reading many of them. The same goes for the compendium entries. Those are a laugh as well and are worth checking out as it gets updated. Even though the game is fairly brutal, it doesn't take itself too seriously. Music is another highlight and complements the game's dark atmosphere well. The tunes that play as you explore are very fitting and remind me of something you'd hear on an N64 game. Then when the action really gets going, things kick up a gear and it sounds class. Everything you've seen so far has been from the demo, but the game actually launched into early access on October 24th. The launch seems to have gone well, and I've already noticed that the dev is responding to feedback and pushing out updates, which is great to see. The developer has also noted that there will be 2 more chapters coming out while it's in early access, and each one will take place in a different time period as the girl's path of vengeance takes her across both space and time. I think it's going to be very interesting to see all of the changes to locations, enemies and weapon types as the game progresses. So yeah, even at this early stage, this game rules and has so much potential. COVEN is out now and I highly recommend giving it a go.
Хорошо с тобой в 30-м царстве, кузнец, как в божий день. Отдыхаешь душой.
Я просто хочу выбраться отсюда.
Где еще ты найдешь такую компанию?
Changing up the pace a bit now, this is Eyed-Likho. Likho? It's one of them, innit? Eyed-Likho, which is a grim first-person horror adventure game set in a world inspired by a dark Slavic folktale. Now personally, I'm a big fan of games that are based on folklore, so when I spotted this one, it was a bit of a no-brainer for me to check it out. In this game, you play as a blacksmith who embarks on an exhilarating journey through 19th century Russia in their search for Likho, a creature who is the embodiment of evil, fate and misfortune that is often depicted as a skinny woman dressed in black and, just like the title suggests, has one eye. From the get-go, this game oozes style. The grayscale graphics and 4:3 aspect ratio are inspired visual choices and help to give it a unique look along with the really oppressive atmosphere. There's lots of weird and evocative imagery in it too, and from what I played in the demo, it leans into this pretty heavily to both confuse and disorientate the player and the main character. A good example of this is right at the start of the game. The smith is at work, then having a drink, then speaking to a creepy unknown figure, then speaking to his friend the tailor. These events happen in the blink of an eye, and before they know it, the smith and tailor have decided to seek out an evil presence and set off on a perilous journey, with no real plan or concern for their safety. I like this opening for a few reasons. It really gets across that these characters' fates are being meddled with in some way. As they speak to each other, you get the impression that they're not even sure why they are putting themselves in danger like this, but are still compelled to do so regardless. It's all a bit weird and unnerving.
Черт, бес его знает, портной.
Говорят, кто ступил в темный лес, не уйдет прежним.
The gameplay is all about exploring creepy locations, finding items and figuring out puzzles. One cool aspect of the puzzle solving is the way the game uses light and darkness. Parts of this game are real dark due to the grayscale, which can make navigating the environment and finding stuff you need pretty tricky. Luckily though, you have a seemingly endless supply of matches at your disposal. Along with being a source of light, these also play a role in solving puzzles, as there are many things that can be set fire to. Sometimes an item may be hidden behind twigs, or a wooden statue might be blocking your path. Flicking a lit match at these will set them on fire and let you progress. Then later on in the demo I had to knock something out of a tree, then burn down the supports of a cliffside to make a path, so I can see there being many uses for the matches as the game goes on. I didn't encounter any enemies and there was no combat to speak of. The game seems to be more focused on the narrative side of things, delivering a sense of dread and unease through its environments and the strange circumstances the player finds themselves in. And from what I've played so far, it's doing a fairly good job of this too. The demo for Eyed-Likho was a bit of a slow burn, but I liked what it was doing. It also ended on a note that had me very intrigued to see where things would go next. It currently doesn't have a release date, but this is one I'll be definitely keeping an eye on.
Ну что, готов? Нет! Стой! Погоди! Лихо! У тебя гости!
So this is Tenebris Somnia, a 2D survival horror game with live action cutscenes, which is just quality. This is one of those games I just had to check out as soon as I heard about what it was doing, and I'm very glad that I did. It was recently announced that New Blood Interactive are publishing it, which is great news. If you don't know who they are, they publish some fantastic games such as Dusk, Gloomwood, Fallen Aces and Ultra Kill, so this game is now in some great company. So in this game you play as a filmmaker called Julia. She's been having a recurring nightmare about her ex-boyfriend where he's killed by horrible creatures. To remedy this and hopefully put these bad dreams to rest, she decides to visit him at his apartment and check that he's okay. Unfortunately for her though, things are much worse than she could have possibly imagined. The apartment is a complete mess, strange symbols are on the doors, an alien substance is all over his studio, and worst of all, these transitions between the gameplay and live action sequences are really effective. They can happen at any time and serve to ramp up the tension considerably. It's also just really cool to go from the pixelated graphics to seeing what it all looks like in real life, then back again. They also seamlessly flow in and out of each other, which creates this really engaging experience. Certain things are revealed in these sequences and you're never quite sure when you'll regain control or if you'll be being attacked when it switches back. It adds a whole new element to the game and I've never really seen anything do it quite like this before. It's proper cool. Just like the visuals, the gameplay is also a bit of a mix of a few genres and playstyles. It's like they've taken an old adventure game like Monkey Island, then combined it with one of the first Resident Evils. This creates a cool mix of old and new, with the game looking like one thing and playing like another. Gameplay is split between exploration, puzzle solving and combat. Puzzles are very much like what you'd see in an adventure game and are all about scouring the environment for items and figuring out where to use them. Everything you pick up gets stored in your inventory and it's in here where you can see Julia's health, combine items together and have access to the old book. You find this strange tome in the apartment and it's full of obscure text that you're unable to read. It does have one legible page though, which is the key to the game's first big puzzle. There wasn't much else I could do with it, but I reckon it'll be pretty important as the game goes on. The combat is different again and feels a bit closer to something like a survival horror game. The action is in real time and you're able to position yourself to attack enemies and avoid attacks and heal if you need to. At first I found it pretty difficult to attack without receiving damage myself, but I eventually figured out the pattern, at least for this first enemy anyway. You also have the option to run past enemies since they're unable to follow you in and out of rooms or to different floors, so that'll be handy if you ever need to conserve health or ammo. I really enjoyed the demo for Tenebris Somnia. It's an interesting game that has some really cool ideas in it. Julia's story has just begun and it definitely has its hooks in me. There's no release date for it currently, but I'm hoping it'll be soon. Which brings us to the end of the list. There are just so many great looking indie horror games coming out and I hope you found something that you like the look of here. If you have any horror games that you're looking forward to, let me know in the comments below so I can go and check them out. Extra points if they also have demos. As always, thanks for watching and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Cheers.